Good morning. On May 4th, we are going to approve changes to S56 and then either after the first floor or before the second floor, we are going to work on S135. And that is our day. We have one of our bills on the floor today, S94 with Representative Anthony. So if everyone could get all hands on deck for that. Excited that that's moving through. And with that, Katie, you've walked through this bill a number of times in various forms. I'm wondering if you think it would be possible to go through the whole bill before 10 or if that's just
sure, let's give it a try.
Okay. I feel like it's been a while since we had a big picture.
Sure.
I need to wrap this up soon, so I thought that would be helpful.
Yes. With some caveats, I can go through the pre-K language. I can't answer a lot of questions.
Okay.
And I might just point you to the sections that Abby has drafted and let her describe what she's doing in those sections.
That sounds good.
Okay. So we have a new legislative intent language. So in 2021, Acts and Resolves 45, that is the previous child care bill. The General Assembly specified its intention that the copayment at the upper limit of the income eligibility scale for a family participating in CCFAP shall not exceed 10% of the family's annual gross income, and that Vermont's early childhood educators are fairly compensated and well supported. The General Assembly continues to strive towards these goals with the passage of this act. And then it is the intent of the General Assembly that investments in and policy changes to Vermont's child care and early learning systems shall make transitional steps toward attaining the recommendations in the reports that were prepared pursuant to Act 25, Sections 13 and 14. Those were the governance systems reports and the financing study. Increase access to and quality of childcare services and after-school and summer care programs throughout the state. Increase equitable access to and quality of pre-K education. Provide financial stability to childcare programs. Stabilize Vermont's talented childcare workforce. Address the workforce needs of the state's employers. Maintain a mixed delivery system for pre-K, childcare, and after-school and summer care. And assign school districts with the responsibility of ensuring equitable access to pre-K education. And then we come to a series of sections pertaining to pre-K.
Can I know originally this bill had a lot around after school and summer care, and I removed those sections. Does it still make sense to reference it in the findings, given that they're all sort of related, or now that the bill doesn't really?
I think it's a good slide. It makes sense to me.
Sort of mentioned twice.
So you took the after school and summer care grant programs out, but you're still, the CCFAP, the rates are still,
Because it's all CCFAP, we can't.
Yeah, I mean, the Senate version of the bill treats after school and summer care differently under CCFAP, but under this proposal, you're sort of addressing them collectively. Okay, so this is our pre-K education implementation committee group. So we're creating the pre-K education implementation committee to assist AOE in improving and expanding accessible, affordable, and high-quality pre-K for children on a full-day basis on or before July 1 of 2026. The pre-K program under consideration would require a school district to provide pre-K education to all children within the district in either a public school or by contract with private providers or both. We have the membership, the Secretary of AOE, who shall serve as co-chair, Secretary of Human Services, who shall serve as co-chair, Executive Director of Vermont Principals Association, Executive Director of Vermont Superintendents Association, Executive Director of the Vermont School Board Association. Okay, great. And then we have that the committee is consulting with stakeholders. Powers and duties, there have been some changes here, so I'll go through this piece. The committee shall examine the delivery of pre-K education in Vermont and make recommendations to expand access to children through the public school system or private providers under contract with the school district or both. The committee shall examine and make recommendations on the changes necessary to provide pre-K education to all children by or through the public school system on or before July 1, 2026, including transitioning students from the 10-hour pre-K benefit, which may yield distinct recommendations for different pre-K ages. The committee's recommendations shall consider the needs of both state and local education agencies, and the committee's analysis and recommendations shall include recommendations for the minimum number of hours that shall constitute the length of a school day for pre-K education in kindergarten, whether there are areas of the state where pre-K education can more effectively and conveniently be furnished in an adjacent state due to geographic considerations, recommendations for pre-K education tuition rates based on the allowable tuition rates for elementary students, recommendation for the administrative process governing contracting for pre-K education, including recommendations for the pre-K education tuition process, recommendations for facilities needs of school districts and for the provision of pre-K education, recommendations for the standards governing which individuals may obtain an educator license endorsement or provisional license for teaching pre-K education, taking into account the committee's recommendations for a mixed delivery system of pre-K education, and recommendations for the provision of essential early education services, including recommendations for determining full-time equivalent enrollment and weighted long-term membership of children receiving services. Assistance, we have the committee having assistance from.
Reading through the whole bill, the first recommendation on that list is around minimum number of hours for pre-K and kindergarten. And then, like later in the bill, we sort of move towards tying things to the minimum number of hours for pre-K. I guess I'm wondering if there's identified a sort of next step for the kindergarten component of the minimum number of hours.
So I think it's just once we have that information,
We like assume someone will do something.
I'm assuming I'm gonna do something. Anyone else want to assume they're gonna do something? Okay, I'll just assume that someone else will join me at the time. I know Peter Collins probably gonna do something.
Okay, like I'm wondering, like we for the
Yes.
pre-K, we sort of in this bill tee up actions.
Yes.
Might we want to consider teeing up actions around pre-K and
So we're teeing up actions for pre-K because it's deeply tied into the early childhood system. The K definition is just sort of something that came up on our journey here that needs to be flagged so that we can understand it for future action related to school age weights. But I don't think tying it into the whole bill makes sense. There are other sort of, there's like a long list of outstanding weighting true ups that need to happen. That exist in Julia's mind. And probably on that very tiny list she has.
okay. And yeah, it seems like now that we all know that there's a thing there.
Yes, that's.
Okay. Just wanted to flag it.
No, appreciate it.
Okay, so we have the assistance language, and then we have a report coming to various committees on December 1st of 2024. And the report shall include draft legislation pursuant to support, language to support the committee's plan. We have some language about the meetings of the committee. We have the Secretary of Education calling the first meeting on July 15th of this year. A majority of the membership constitutes a quorum. The group ceases to exist February 1st of 2025. We have compensation and reimbursement for 18 meetings of this group. The payments are made from money appropriated to AOE. And then in terms of appropriations, we have $7,500 appropriated to AOE from the general fund for FY24 for per diem compensation and reimbursement. Some of $100,000 is appropriated to AOE from the general fund in FY24 for the cost of retaining a contractor as provided in subsection D, and any unused portion of the appropriation shall, as of July 1, 2025, revert to the general fund.
Is there any way we can add some teeth to this in that there's an awful lot that is supposed to get done by the time this report comes out in like a year and a half, I think. I mean, the committee has to be formed, they have to have their first meeting and all. If it slows up, if the committee does not have a quorum by December, is there some way we can say, Is there something we can do to move things along if that doesn't happen, if some of these things aren't met?
So I think one of the things that's been hardest for me about being in the legislature is that when we put something into law, that doesn't mean necessarily happens. And I don't mean that lightly, it's like waiting a busy. But I don't, Katie, or like I mean, we have the contingency date sort of related to all of this, but
You have a date when they're calling the first meeting. So you're sort of getting the ball rolling on a particular date.
But is there some summer group that could keep an eye on it or something, joint oversight of something that it could say, it could look in and say, this is not progressing quite as quickly as we expected. Can you move a little quicker?
I think there are people who will do that. I don't think it's a role for joint fiscal. But I think that they're,
Okay. There's nothing,
you're welcome.
there's nothing easy to, they can,
If there was, we could fix a lot.
Or, you could ask, look at the dates, maybe December 1st of this year, you could ask for progress or, my guess is they won't have much to report, but they have started meeting. And
well, I mean, that's a start.
yeah,
So I'm just worried that things look, feet will get dragged and yeah, we would have liked to produce that report, but we didn't manage to do it.
I think the ability to hire a contractor to help with the report makes a big difference.
Oh, that's true.
It increases staffing capacity and like there would be one person who would be focused on carrying it across the finish line rather than someone doing it in the course of all their other workload.
One thing that kind of when it gets into the money, it seems to me that there's an assumption in here that expansion of pre-K and sending AAT to centers, like, that's all just getting picked up by the ed fund.
To move to the one?
Well, and sending a much larger payment to centers to offer full-day pre-K for 4-year-olds. And I mean, that just all goes to the ed fund, and I'm wondering, like, is AHS gonna, are they part of this funding, or is it just all gonna go to property taxpayers?
So that's a very good question. It's a totally separate question. How are you?
Yeah.
I'm all
Good, okay. Yeah, it's a good question.
The ed fund would be assuming an expense that is currently an AHS general fund expense.
I think it's a family expense rate, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, for example, the AHS centers to educate 4-year-olds, at least. They're spending money, they're sending money, AHS is sending money to centers for 4-year-olds.
If in maybe even all 12 versions of this bill, but at least in what's in front of us, if a family chooses not to participate in the pre-K program at their school, and instead, are they eligible for CCFAPS?
yeah, they could, they could take, their CCFAP eligible, they could use their benefit at a private provider.
Right, the private provider's gonna get AAT. AAT could exceed what the center even collect.
Are you saying average announced tuition?
Yeah.
And I don't think the average announced tuition is assumed in this bill either. I think that's part of what's being figured out, is how much it would be. Do you want to add something to the report about how it would actually be covered by the ed fund? So that's flagged as an issue?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to say in there, that, and how will this added expense, be paid by AHS and LEAs?
Yeah.
I'd hate to, AAT is $20,000. You multiply that times 5,000 kids, the high end, I mean, that's
And Julia's
$100,000,000.
Julia's come up with estimates of that before, so she can run back through those again before we move this along, but. So in the report back, something about how the possible, so again, it's tax capacity and it's not, but the possible impact on the education fund. And like strategies for covering it. Or considerations for the increased cost of the ed fund?
Yeah,
Okay.
which funds will pay it?
Yeah.
You know, general fund or ed fund.
Okay. Okay. So we're on section 2A, bottom of page 7, top of page 8. This is the pre-K education model contract. By December 1st of 2024, AOE, in consultation with members of the committee and other relevant stakeholders, shall develop a model contract for school districts to use for contracting with private providers for pre-K education services. The model contract shall include anti-discrimination provision that requires compliance with the Vermont Public Accommodations Act, Vermont Fair Employment Practices, and staff teaching licensure requirements, which shall be consistent with the committee's recommendations regarding licensure standards and requirements for the provision of special education services. And you have a report at 2B on pre-K pupil waiting. So by December 1st of this year, AOE, in consultation with the committee, shall analyze and issue a written report to the General Assembly regarding whether the cost of education and.
You don't have to read the whole thing.
Thanks. Okay.
Generally, you don't have to read the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
just like,
Great. A high level. Okay, great.
I go mid-level.
High level. Okay.
High level for us is like 4 seconds per page. We do that sometimes.
We got 52 here. I just want to come back to this piece on the pupil waiting report, and as we're looking at pre-K weights, I guess I'd like to see some subtle reference to, as we develop a new pre-K weight, that this report comment on how that new weight might align or impact other weights. Not suggesting a deep, full analysis, but as this new weight is being developed.
Maybe align with other weight changes or the existing weighting system or something.
Can you say that again?
We can get closer like later, but something like align with
Fine.
existing weighting system.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be detailed analysis, it could be like comment or recommendation or whatever.
That they're harmonized in some way between the pre-K and K.
Madam Chair, Catherine's mentioned that concern several times. Is there something specific you were worried about there?
So like, Tammy developed recommendations for all the other weights, and they work in concert with each other. It's a pie, and they sort of divide up the pie. And if we change one weight, the weight of the other weights may be impacted, and want to make sure that if we're making some changes, we're aware of the impacts that might have on other weights, or that we're recalibrating to make sure that the other weights that were empirically derived have their intended weight or impact on taxing capacity.
But we don't want to task the AOE
We
dealing with
don't.
all of that, so it would crash the whole.
Right.
Yeah.
So not asking them to recalibrate, but I guess at least in proposing a new pre-K weight, comment on whether the impact on other weights is de minimis, to use our favorite word, or maybe recommend additional analysis by other people, or
Okay, I
I
got
mean, I
it.
think it's, I don't think one.
so I want someone to say that.
Yeah, I don't think one way changes any other way.
And we don't
It
need
needs to be
to,
aligned.
yes.
Methodology needs to be correct.
That was what Brad said yesterday.
And again, we do need to recalibrate the 27, so it'd also get that adjustment. So I appreciate that. So naming it, and then that sounds like a perfect path forward.
I didn't realize we were going very deeply into pre-K, so
Yes.
on her way
Yes, and we'll, it's okay, we can,
some of these questions.
okay, and we can just like get that, so I can just get that sentence to Beth.
Okay.
Yeah, great, yeah.
Okay, so that was 2B. 2C is Agency of Ed data collection and sharing.
And Julia's talked to us about this all the time.
Great.
And yesterday.
And then in section 3, you have your weighting. You're striking through the pre-K negative 0.54 weight, replacing it with 1, and then you have a contingent effective date in 3A. So section 3, the weight won't take effect unless on or before July 1 of 2026, the General Assembly enacts legislation establishing the following: a definition for the minimum number of hours to constitute full day, pre-K requirement that all school districts shall be required to follow the same minimum number of hour requirements, and a requirement that all school districts shall be required to follow the same contracting requirements for the provision of pre-K education. And then we have language on a plan for Agency of Education leadership. There's corresponding language later with regard to possibly reorganizing DCF. The concept is coming up with a plan on how to elevate childcare and early education within AOE, and looking at leadership changes in the organization of that structure. Okay. And we move on to subsidies. Maybe I should tell Beth not to come now, since we're moving out of her section. Yeah. She's gonna get here.
Right, she sounded.
Yeah. We're done with pre-K. Okay. CCFAP eligibility. This is where in subdivision A2, we have our language. First, the subsidy authorized by this subsection and the corresponding family contribution shall be established by the commissioner by rule and shall bear a reasonable relationship to income and family size. The commissioner may adjust the subsidy and family contribution by rule to account for increasing childcare costs, not to exceed 1.5 times the most recent annual increase in the NAICS code 611. In terms of family co-payments, families that are under or at 150 FPL have no copay. That's not a change from existing law. There are changes on line 19 where the group of families who are eligible to receive some type of CCFAP benefit is expanded from those individuals who are at or below 350 FPL to families who are at or below 550 FPL. Okay. And then we have the same section amended again. So the section we just looked at is amended as of January 1, 2024. This section 5A is effective as of July 1, 2024. And you're adding 2 new subdivisions. The first has to do with the applications to make sure you're using simple plain language format, complying with the language access report. Subdivision 6 is participation in CCFAP by individuals who do not have a citizenship status that would allow for participation in CCFAP, and those individuals would be solely state funded. In section 5B, we have language about the family contribution, the family copay in the program. Right now, the family copay begins at $25 for individuals at 151% of FPL, and this would increase the family copay to $27 for families at 151 FPL, and it would go up from there on a sliding scale. Section 6, this is the provider rate adjustment. So first we have legislative intent language. It's the intent the General Assembly that the provider rate adjustment established in this section shall be an initial step towards implementing the professional pay scale that's established later in this bill, and that programs use funds to elevate the quality through higher compensation for staff, curriculum implementation, staff professional development, and improvements to learning environments. And then in subdivision B1, we have language that on January 1st of this coming year, DCF is to adjust rates to the base childcare provider reimbursement rates in CCFAP for services provided at center-based, family childcare homes, and after-school programs. The adjusted rate is to account for the age of the children served and be 38.5% higher than the current 5-star level reimbursement rate for programs. The adjusted rate shall then be adjusted to account for the differential between family childcare homes and center-based and preschool programs by 50%. All providers in the same childcare setting category receive a reimbursement rate which shall be dependent on the type of setting. So this sort of readjusts the base moving forward. And the provider rate adjustment established in section shall become part of the base budget in future fiscal years. Then we have an appropriation for fiscal year 24 for this adjustment and for the section 5 expansion of which families are served under CCFAP. So that number, in addition to other funds appropriated elsewhere, is $48,699,264. And then in subdivision B1, in addition to other funds appropriated elsewhere in fiscal year 24, $4 million is appropriated from the general fund to CBD to administer CCFAP through the authorization of 6 positions. And then we have the list of the 6 positions on page 18. And then $2 million of that $4 million is appropriated to the community child care support agencies. Next, section 8, these are readiness payments. So we have over 18 million appropriated here. And the concept here is that the rate adjustment won't happen until January 1 of 2024. So this particular pot of money is used beginning July 1, 23 for the next 6 months, maybe beyond that if there's still money left over, to sort of prepare programs for the changes that are occurring in this bill. And it says the payments specifically may be used for increasing capacity for infants and toddlers, expanding the number of family childcare homes, improving childcare facilities, preparing private pre-K, pre-qualified providers, changes in the pre-K system, expanding operation hours, addressing gaps in services, expanding capacity, increasing workforce capacity, other uses approved by the commissioner. So this is meant to be sort of a broad pool of money, I guess.
Does this program already exist?
The readiness payments, no.
There's another grant program that's sort of similar, kind of.
So there have been, in the past few budgets, I believe, there has been, I want to say 7 million for the past 2 years, at least last year, that had money going out for like retention bonuses. So this is similar.
So it's not starting completely from scratch?
I mean, this can be used more broadly, but you'll see in subsection B that sort of saying that these grants can be distributed the same way that money has been distributed previously. So it's sort of saying you can use the same distribution model. If,
and they have an existing system to send payments out the door to providers. And so it wouldn't be setting up a new payment system. And they're very explicitly payments and not grants for that, in order to make sure that it sort of continues within that same system.
Okay.
And I both really appreciate the concept of these readiness grants, and also subsection 2 there about providing technical assistance, and imagine that the 5% will not necessarily be sufficient to cover all of the demand and need. And so I'm wondering if there was sort of some conversation about prioritizing the use of those dollars around technical assistance, and wondering about, ensuring that we're focusing on the most underserved areas as we provide technical assistance.
I think that's a conversation done with the Human Services Committee, because there's a technical assistance sort of like universe that they're contracting with, that, and then those providers make decisions about how they do their work, and we don't have time to take testimony on how that works. But it's a whole ecosystem.
my concern often is that there's a certain level of capacity needed to access technical assistance, and that too often we don't identify the
Yes, it's
sort of gaps.
and that's a thing that I would talk to Human Services Committee about, because my understanding of the early childhood sort of support system is that it's quite accustomed to working with home care providers and one-on-one with folks, and it's like a much more sort of grassroots system than your average, even regional development corporation.
And then this has the commissioner providing a status report and the distribution of these payments to JFC. Next is our amendment to 3514. This is payment to providers. Currently, payment to providers is very much linked to a market rate survey and to the provider's performance in the STARS program. So this language decouples that link between payments and the STARS program. Instead, we have a payment schedule that is accounting for the age of the children served. All providers in the same setting category receive a reimbursement rate payment, which is dependent on their setting category. And the rate used to reimburse providers is to be increased over the previous year's rate annually in alignment with the NAICS 611 educational services, and this is not to exceed 5%. Then we have language in subdivision 2. This is about enrollment versus attendance and the department adopting rules. I will.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you go back just to that? That there's fine. So we're establishing a new base for the rate and increasing it not to exceed 5%. Does that go on now for the future? Are we not going to use the market survey anymore, the market rate survey anymore either?
Correct. This is in the green books. So this would go on that from after the rate is adjusted, that this increase in accordance with this, aligning with this scale would happen every year moving forward.
How do we get up to the level of reimbursement that the RAND report is going to be looking to?
I didn't hear your question, I just know you're looking at me, I'm sorry.
How do we get up to the reimbursement rates that the RAND report is going to be needing? That cost of care reimbursement.
So this bill takes us halfway-ish more, that's on Joyce and Nolan's charts that they shared with us is how far it goes. And the idea is that then there's further legislative action. So this gets inflated from the base, but then further legislative action is needed if we're going to do another big jump.
But how does it get us halfway there? By the inflation adjustment from the
rate, the fiscal year 24, where was it?
So we're
This
setting
language.
we're setting new rates there?
So we're doing a sort of we're resetting the base here. So this year there's sort of a big jump to reset the base, and then moving forward, there's an annual escalator.
And resetting the base is implementing the RAND report kind of recommendation.
Halfway.
Halfway.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, got it. Sorry.
No problem. So I think I made it through this section. This is where we're striking through the STARS language. Then this section 10 creates a quality and capacity incentive program. It takes effect January 1, 2024. And then we have sort of language that says annually consistent with funds appropriated, because there's not necessarily funds built in for this. They require an annual appropriation. That if a provider achieves certain items on this list, they would receive a bonus payment from the department. And then we have a list of all the things that would qualify for a bonus payment. And then we have legislative intent language that it's the intent of the General Assembly that in fiscal year 25 and moving forward, at least 10 million is appropriated to that incentive and quality program. So it's legislative intent language, it's aspirational, it's not binding. Section 11, this is the only section from the bill as introduced that has made it all the way through the process.
Well, let's do something.
I have to propose
So this is language about not charging an application or a waitlist fee for families applying to a program who would otherwise qualify for CCFAP. Section 12, you'll notice that this 3517 is amended twice. It's amended in section 12 and 12A. So first we have language that a regulated childcare provider would not impose an increase on annual child care tuition that exceeds 1.5 times the most recent annual increase in the NAICS inflator, and the amount is to be posted to the department's website. So that would take effect January 1 of 2024. And then in the next section, there is the addition of this new subsection B, that a child care provider participating in CCFAP will not charge a family a tuition rate that exceeds the total amount that the child care provider receives for providing services to a child enrolled in CCFAP. And we're dividing total amount to mean both the subsidy and the family copay. This section is designed to take effect July 1, 2027, but it's subject to a contingency. So we'll look at that contingency language as we move further on in the bill.
The way this is drafted, would this apply to only families that are CCFAP eligible or all families?
All families.
Okay.
Section 12B, this is the provider ownership disclosure. First piece of this is all definitions, but here's the disclosure. The department is to adopt procedures to require an applicant to disclose prior to entering a provider rate agreement the type of business organization of the applicant, the identity of applicants and owners' principals, identity of the owners and principals of the applicant's affiliates. We have diversity and equity, inclusion language with regard to the materials produced in relationship to CCFAP. Rulemaking. I have updated the director name because in the version that came out of Human Services, I had the wrong title for the director. It's the program director. And then we have language in subsection B, directing the department to review and commit and consider amending. First, in subdivision 1, this is a rule prohibiting a person from or entity registered or licensed as a family child care home from concurrently operating a different type of program. And then the new language added by this committee is review and consider amending its eligibility policies addressing self-employment and other areas of specialized need on a regular basis and revise them consistent with research on best practices in the field to maximize participation in the program and minimize undue burden on families applying for CCFAP. Reports. We have a report on background checks. There is sometimes individuals who are providing childcare services in an educational setting have to go through 2 separate background checks to conform with 2 separate sets of regulations. And this is looking for information on how to streamline and improve the timeliness of that those requirements. This is a plan on how to improve specialized accommodation grants. You have deleted all of the language on after school and summer care grant program as it is in the budget. Workforce supports. There is currently in statute the student loan repayment assistance program. As drafted, it was designed to sunset on July 1, 2026. This language repeals the repeal, so this would make the program permanent. Next, transitional assistance and governance. We have language that by February of this coming year, DCF would provide a presentation on the use of establishing administrative service organizations to child care providers. In section 21, we have technical assistance language. So in order to ensure successful implementation.
Can you that last section for a second?
Yes.
They've done that like a few times before, right?
I am not aware if they have. I know earlier language had sort of like, how do we do this? And the request was to back off and sort of talk about progress towards, using administrative service organizations. So,
Okay.
that's all I've got on that one. I can find out more if you'd like. Section 21, technical assistance, in order to ensure successful implementation of expanded childcare, pre-K and after-school and summer care, and to identify policy changes and investments to achieve the recommendations outlined in the two reports from Act 45, the governance report and the financing study. Building Bright Futures shall be responsible for monitoring accountability, supporting stakeholders, and collectively defining and measuring success, maximizing stakeholder engagement, and providing technical assistance to build capacity for CDD and AOE. And specifically, we have Building Bright Futures, ensuring accountability through monitoring the transitions and submitting an annual report. We have them defining and measuring success of this expanded system, using outcomes, using continuous quality improvement framework and engaging stakeholders to develop benchmarks for success. And there's the list of what those benchmarks would be related to. And then we have an appropriation for this additional work that Building Bright Futures would do, and it would come out of the appropriation in 7B, which is that $4 million. Section 22 is this is the DCF governance. So this is sort of the partner language to what you've already seen with regard to the AOE leadership, sort of looking at DCF, talking about how it might be restructured in order to elevate the status of childcare and early education within AHS. Childcare provider wages, this has not changed since the last time I've walked through it. This sets a pay scale as of January 1, 2027, subject to a contingency. This, as we've already talked about, sets a floor, and it references all of the different provider types as defined in rule. So we have the scales, and then we go into a long list of all the different provider types and the cross-reference to the rule.
Can you go up to the,
Yeah, where should I
just, right?
start at the beginning?
This is the language that Damien took us through.
Shouldn't, excuse me?
I was just saying this is the language Damien took us through.
I'm just, there's nothing that says per hour or anything like that. I don't want the director to get paid $24.
A year.
That's not going in the right direction.
The same rate. Maybe that's some, Susan's.
We'll check in with Damien about it. Damien.
If I might, I think I had raised the possibility of saying and adding something about, a provider could go X percent below these things that they provide benefits. And the more I think about that, the more I feel like I don't want to go below anything.
Great, love that. There's a contingency that I think is gonna be really important for everyone to understand before we can fully digest this section. Present it back.
I'm uncomfortable with this section, especially in combination with 12A.
Which one's 12A?
That's the revenue, can't charge more than. I mean, these are education centers. 80% of their expenses are payroll. We are basically bracketing their net income. And that is when.
Bracketing, just.
We're controlling their revenue and we're controlling their expenses. And that is going to play out very differently across the state of Vermont. It is going to play out very differently. So I'm very uncomfortable bracketing net income of the business, especially uncomfortable doing that with the variety of socioeconomics we have across the state. I think you'll find that centers will just can't operate under this structure. And then I think there is the benefit issue. And I've talked to providers in my area, and I talked to one Their rates are slightly less than this, but what their people want are benefits. And I just am leaning towards just me is that I could live with 12A if it was just a restriction on CC FAP families. But I really think we should move away from this idea and let the markets determine what people are going to get paid in salary and benefits.
And let's make sure we also look at the contingency language too.
I wonder if, it's just an idea, if we could talk about percentages of the total amount that's spent at a childcare center as being allocated to teacher pay and benefits. That would allow flexibility for pay or benefits for individuals for what they might choose. But it would also, it would force a certain percentage to be spent on the employees, so it couldn't be spent on something else. And
So my understanding from Damien is this is basically like just the way we can structure this in order to be like within the bounds of legality around mandating something regarding. And I also think it's like these rates are pegged to what it will take to create a system that from the RAND report, right? And so I think there's something, to be debated about whether or not it is appropriate to sort of control the market in this way, which there's also a debate whether it's actually a public market or private market at this point, once we've like 90% of the money in it is public dollars, but sort of towards what Scott was saying. But these rates are sort of the rates that are determined to be what is needed to create a system that would actually be sustainable and accessible. So that's why we would put it in statute. It would, there's sort of the question around where profits go, but the bigger question is like that these are the sort of bare rates that are determined to be needed to create a system that works. But
What's the effective date?
we'll get there. Yeah.
So, moving ahead to 23A? B. A. Hold on, I'll get there. So you have a report in 23A that when we get to January 1, 2026, JFO is going to submit information to the various committees to estimate a current minimum wage level based on Vermont and other state data regarding wage levels for early care and education providers. So the idea is that previous section, the pay scale, would take effect July 1, 2027, subject to a contingency. But before we get to that July 1, 2027 date, on January 1, 2026, JFO is going to look at these numbers again and sort of see if they're still in the ballpark and provide updated information. So now we get to the contingency. So we have language that section 12, what's that, 12A? 12A, so adding that subsection B to the childcare tuition rates. And then the language we just looked at, the pay scales, would not take effect unless on or before January 1, 2027, the General Assembly enacts legislation that adjusts rates in the Child Care Financial Assistance Program to ensure participating child care providers are reimbursed for the total cost of care.
Then why do we even mention a rate if we're gonna do a report in 2026?
Because everything that we've heard from the business community, this is like purely my opinion on this, but everything we heard from the business community and from other testimony on this, that folks, like this is a big deal that we're doing this, right? Like it's a huge amount of revenue we're raising. I don't want to sugarcoat it. And so I want the bill to have as much full transparency about what next steps might look like as possible so that like we're not surprising anyone with something in 3 years or 4 years, that like this is laying, like the last two bills on this have laid out next steps really, really explicitly. And I want to make sure that this bill does that even more explicitly, given how much money we're putting into it. And like, of course, we can go back in next year, the year after and change whatever we did, right? Like we can't bind future legislators, but it feels to me, and like totally just my feelings, disingenuous to be moving forward with all of these other things without more sort of explicit acknowledgement about what the steps looks like. And so that's why it's sort of like, this will happen unless this other thing happens.
Yeah, it's just, again, like kind of what Scott said, it's uncomfortable to put it on a ceiling and floor.
Totally. Yeah.
And then in the same breath that we're putting a wage in here that we're not even gonna know if it makes sense for another 3 years. So it's a little.
Yeah.
Thanks. And it's a little, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just weird that we're gonna throw a number out there that in 3 years might not even make sense.
And so it's a number that's in the study now, and then JFO would be updating the number in 3 years. So it's not like there's, like, we don't have information now and that we're not gonna, and they would be basing it on the data that we have now. But I hear you. It is weird.
I would just feel way better about it if it was in the intent language of the bill versus actually down.
We have the bell coming. So I just wanna, after this, is it just Abby's sections? Is there anything else? Okay, yeah, great, okay. Sorry.
And I guess we do,
Someday I'll turn that all the way.
yeah, and recognizing that it's a floor, it's a minimum that centers could adjust and adapt. We do have various different markets and different geographies, and as we look at school contracts, there's variability, but worth continuing to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I do appreciate the idea, we don't know everything, but we're trying to telegraph to centers, to educators, to parents and families.
To people who are thinking about going into this field.
Or imagining having children, like, can you count on a system that will provide professional wages, reimburse centers enough to make the system work, where pre-K is headed for 3 and 4 year olds? I mean, there are a lot of big changes, and I think even though we don't know everything, being able to provide as many guideposts about where we're going, that will continue to be informed by further research and recommendations is important. And concerns around the floor.
I wish.
Julia's next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just, I appreciate where you guys are coming from on that, but coming into this session, I was like, if we can do one thing for childcare, it has to be to raise wages. It has to be. Because that is, to me, the fulcrum of the entire system working the way it should work for families and providers. And as much as I appreciate where you're coming from, to me, this might be the most important thing we do to make sure, A, we're giving the money to providers so they can do this, and B, that they use that money to do things that really fix the system. And I think that's the absolute nexus of where this work starts to take hold.
I don't know, I've talked to a lot of my centers, and I wish we had statewide data, but when I asked my centers what happened July 1st when 37 million extra got pumped into the system, they said, we increased our wages.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the market will work if we let it work. And also, I mean, the benefits thing is huge. I mean, you're talking, somebody might look at these, like, I'll work for this amount of money, but give me the benefits. Another worker might be like, I don't need the benefits. I'll just take the money. That could be a very wide range of rates that those people are getting paid. Each center will have to figure that out.
Representative Demer, Lorgan, and Rob.
Yeah, I like Representative Sims and Representative Andrews. I think I understand where Representative Mattos and Representative Beck are coming from. But I really want to see this workforce issue fixed. And I think that the issue around benefits is true across the spectrum of human service jobs these days. There isn't, if you go to one of the designated agencies, you're going to hear the same thing. They would really love to find a way to pay folks benefits, but I don't, we're just not there yet. And I think that increasing salaries is the best way to do it. And I would hope that at some point we don't have to have this structure anymore. But I think starting off, we sure that the workforce, the money that we're investing on a workforce here works.
So next steps, just in this room. Do folks want another walkthrough on Abby's language? Is that helpful for us to be doing after the floor?
I have fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, okay, so I think you're probably a good decision from us. Yes, thank you for perfectly timing that. And we will be back here. It's possible something will happen on the floor and we'll be able to get back here to do 1:35 before lunch, but if not, we'll do it.